Welcome, everyone. The subcommittee will come to order. I ask unanimous consent that the chair be authorized to declare a recess at any time during today's hearing. Without objection, so ordered. I also ask unanimous consent that members not on the subcommittee be permitted to sit with the subcommittee at today's hearing and ask questions. Without objection, so ordered. As a reminder, please keep your microphones muted unless speaking. Should I hear any inadvertent background noise, I will request that the member please mute their microphone. And to insert a document into the record, please have your staff email it to documentsti@mail.house.gov. documentsti@mail.house.gov. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. And welcome again to today's important hearing on small passenger vessel safety. Before we get started, I want to take a minute to acknowledge the passing of my colleague, the Dean of the House, and a member of this subcommittee, Congressman Don Young. He was a fierce advocate for the people of Alaska, and over his 25 terms, that's 50 years, serving in Congress, was a former chair of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. That's the overall governing committee of the subcommittee that I'm a part of and that this hearing is for, and pushed for investments in our nation's infrastructure. My thoughts are with his family. Moving on to today's hearing, it is taking place in my district, beautiful Santa Barbara, California. But the location is also, unfortunately, significant for another reason. 27 miles south of here, on September 2nd, 2019, 34 individuals tragically lost their lives. On that date, the dive boat Conception caught fire while all the passengers were asleep because there was no interconnected fire alarm system on the vessel. The passengers and crew were not alerted to the fire as smoke filled the lower levels. A roving night watch was required by law to be awake, and if they were, they might have been able to alert the passengers. Unfortunately, that did not happen. I share my deepest condolences to the victims' families, some of whom have joined us here today. I cannot begin to understand the sorrow these families have gone through. Going forward, we must ensure that safety measures are adopted so that no other family must endure this pain. I hope Admiral Mauger and Chair Homendy can take the time to visit with the families who are in attendance today to hear their thoughts and worries, also so that progress to make our waters safer can be made together. At this moment, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence in honor of each of the 34 individuals who lost their lives. Today, I hope to hear how the Coast Guard has taken steps to address National Transportation Safety Board recommendations and implement regulations required in my bill, the Small Passenger Vessel Safety Act, which passed into law at the end of the 116th Congress as part of the Elijah E. Cummings Coast Guard Authorization Act of 2020. We need to know that the Coast Guard inspected vessels will be as safe as possible for passengers as well as crew members. At the time of the tragedy, the Conception was exempt from certain requirements that applied to newer vessels and was in compliance with those that did apply. Updated laws and regulations must be immediately implemented when deficiencies are identified. It is the responsibility of Congress to prioritize the lives and public safety of crews and passengers. This hearing is needed to evaluate the oversight of small passenger vessels and identify what is working and what needs improvement. The United States has a history of taking reactionary approach to safety, creating maritime safety laws after tragedies rather than preemptively strengthening safety requirements for a more robust industry, one that is effectively regulated and inspected. I share the NTSB's concerns that recent accidents on small passenger vessels demonstrate that poor preventative maintenance, lax fire prevention, and inadequate crew training all continue to be contributing factors leading to disaster. The board also highlights the importance of safety management systems on all types of vessels to prepare crews for emergency scenarios. These important recommendations were policies that I included in my Small Passenger Vessel Safety Act. And recently, the Coast Guard released new interim rules for overnight passenger vessels. These are important steps towards full implementation of improved safety standards. But I share concerns in the Coast Guard's response. It took nearly a year for the interim rules to be released after passage of the act, even though the National Transportation Safety Board provided these recommendations years before the Conception's tragedy. It took congressional action to force the Coast Guard's hand. This is of great concern to me. I expect the final rule to come out promptly and to address every requirement in my legislation, including requirements to document and monitor the training certifications of all crew members. Going forward, there's more work to be done, not just by the Coast Guard and NTSB, but by Congress as well. Included in the upcoming House Coast Guard Reauthorization Act is my other legislation, the Small Passenger Vessel Liability Fairness Act, which will update antiquated liability laws so that the victims and their families receive just compensation in the wake of such tragedies. No amount of compensation can bring back a loved one or make the pain go away, but it is necessary to hold the responsible parties accountable. We've also included a requirement that the Coast Guard respond to all NTSB recommendations, which I hope will help improve the working relationship and make the Coast Guard act quicker. Oversight of safety measures is vital to protecting lives and property. It is incumbent on the industry, in conjunction with the Coast Guard, to provide a safe, reliable experience for passengers. It is also the job of this committee to conduct proper oversight so that everyone who steps onto a vessel reaches the end of their voyage safely. I now call on the ranking member of the subcommittee, Mr. Gibbs, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Carbajal, and thank you for holding this important hearing today. Like you, I wish to express my condolences to Chairman Don Young's family for his passing Friday. Don was a very good friend. He was an icon on this committee. He was chairman of this committee years ago, and also chairman of the Natural Resources Committee and dean of the House, along with serving member. And so we're really going to miss Don Young and all his humor and also his knowledge, historical knowledge. It's going to be greatly missed. So I put my sympathies to his family and his wife. I know that the small passenger vessel safety is particularly important to you given the tragic dive boat fire that occurred in your district in 2019. You responded quickly after the fire, and as a result of your efforts, Congress enacted Section 8441 of the Cummings Coast Guard Authorization of 2020, regulations for covered small passenger vessels. I look forward to hearing today about the Coast Guard's plans to implement Section 8441. Today's hearing will also look at the regulation of vessels popularly known as duck boats. These vessels have been involved in several significant marine casualties, including the 2018 accident in the Table Rock Lake, Missouri. I am pleased that H.R. 6865, the Coast Guard Authorization Act of 2022, includes a provision to strengthen the regulation of these vessels. Chairman DeFazio sponsored H.R. 6865. Chairman Coggerhall and I, and the full committee, Ranking Member Sam Graves, are original co-sponsors. The provision relating to the duck boats is based on legislation introduced by Congressman Carson and Senator Hawley. Both are from Missouri. I commend them for their important work on this issue. As for small passenger vessels without overnight accommodations, I look forward to hearing what actions the Coast Guard is planning to improve duck boat safety. Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry that my schedule didn't allow me to join you today in your district, but I am glad that you are holding this hearing. I look forward to the witness testimony and you go back to balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. And thank you for joining us virtually nonetheless. You are missing out on visiting Paradise, but we'll discuss that later. With that, let's move on to our witnesses. I would like to welcome all our witnesses. Today we have Rear Admiral John Mauger, Assistant Commandant for Prevention Policy for the United States Coast Guard, and the Honorable Jennifer Homendy, Chair of the National Transportation Safety Board. Thank you both for being here today, and I look forward to your testimony. Without objection, our witnesses' full statements will be included in the record. Since your written testimony has been made part of the record, the subcommittee requests that you limit your oral testimony to 5 minutes. With that, Admiral Mauger, you may proceed.
Good morning, Chairman Carbajal, Ranking Member Gibbs, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss passenger vessel safety and the Coast Guard's role in advancing a safe and secure U.S. maritime industry. On behalf of the Coast Guard, I express our deepest sympathies to the families and loved ones of those who perished in the tragedies on board the dive boat Conception and the amphibious passenger vessel Stretch Duck 7. I see many family members of those who have lost loved ones on board Conception here today and recognize the work that Advocacy 34 has done to honor their lives and prevent future tragedies. Passenger vessel safety is personal. The fleet of U.S. small passenger vessels carry our families and friends to work and school and provide once-in-a-lifetime adventures. The victims of these two casualties and their families are at the forefront of our minds here in the Coast Guard as we work to strengthen safety standards, enhance oversight, and ensure compliance so that loved ones are transported safely on small passenger vessels. The Coast Guard's approach to small passenger vessel safety is guided by our prevention concept of operations, which includes standards, compliance, and assessment. The Coast Guard sets standards for the safe, secure, and sustainable operation of vessels, facilities, mariners, and the waterways. In the field, Coast Guard personnel verify compliance with those standards through plan review, inspection, and document verification. When accidents occur, Coast Guard Marine casualty investigators conduct thorough investigations to learn from these casualties and improve our standards and compliance activities. In addition to conducting our own assessments, the Coast Guard looks to other leading safety organizations, including the National Transportation Safety Board, for insights and continuous improvement. The Coast Guard works closely with NTSB and values our strong relationship and the expertise and safety recommendations that NTSB provides. With tremendous support from Congress in the Elijah E. Cummings Coast Guard Authorization Act of 2020, the Coast Guard accelerated the development and publication of significant new safety regulations which address all of the contributing factors to the loss of life on board Conception. On March 28th, just 1 week from today, the interim rule for fire protection on small passenger vessels will implement key safety provisions to address new requirements in the law. This rule substantially increases the safety of small passenger vessels by requiring increased fire detection, increased fire suppression, improved means of escape, safer handling of flammable items, additional crew training, and monitoring of night watches on board vessels. These changes, together with pending safety management system requirements, address all of the NTSB recommendations stemming from the fire on board Conception. These new requirements also reinforce that vessel safety is a shared responsibility between the owner-operator, the captain and crew, and the Coast Guard. The owner-operator sets the overall safety culture for the company and provides the captain and crew with resources to maintain, train, and equip the safe operation of their vessel. The captain and crew require training and credentials to perform their duties and are ultimately responsible for the safe operation of their vessels. The Coast Guard sets the standard, enforces compliance with those standards, and drives continuous improvement through assessments. In the immediate aftermath of the Conception fire, the Coast Guard implemented a new tiered approach to allocate our most experienced inspectors to the highest priority small passenger vessel safety inspections. The Coast Guard gathered data from previous inspections, investigations, and subject matter expertise, and employed machine learning to gain new insights and prioritize the risks. Under this policy, every small passenger vessel is inspected annually, and the highest priority vessels are inspected more frequently by our most experienced inspectors. This change to our compliance policy has successfully identified and corrected deficiencies, thereby preventing serious consequences. Mr. Chairman, with the strong support of Congress in fiscal years 20 through 22, the Coast Guard is increasing the readiness of our marine inspection workforce. 126 new marine safety billets were added to the Coast Guard over the past 3 years. 87 of those are in the field. With funding provided through the CARES Act and subsequent fiscal year appropriations, the service is transforming our mobile solutions to make our inspectors and investigators more capable. To better train the workforce, the Coast Guard is employing ready learning technology as part of the Marine Inspection Performance Support Architecture to ensure that marine inspectors have the knowledge, skills that are required to keep pace in this dynamically changing maritime industry. Mr. Chairman, passenger vessel safety is a service priority, and it is personal to each of us. Again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your oversight and for your support of the Coast Guard. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Admiral Mauger. Next, we will proceed to Chair Homendy. You may proceed.
Thank you, Chairman Carbajal, Ranking Member Gibbs, and members of the subcommittee. It's an honor to appear here today. Admiral Mauger, thank you for your commitment to safety, and on behalf of the NTSB, we greatly appreciate the Coast Guard's collaboration with us in our investigations, which we carry out with mutual respect and the goal of improving safety on our nation's waterways. I'd also like to take a moment to once again offer my sincerest condolences to those who've lost loved ones in the tragedies that we'll discuss today. I especially want to acknowledge the families of those who perished on the Conception, many of whom are here in this room or watching remotely today. I can't imagine all that you've been through since September 2019. I greatly admire your strength, your courage, and your commitment to ensuring no one else loses a loved one on another tragedy on our waterways. The Conception investigation was my first marine investigation as a board member. The experience deepened my commitment to improve marine safety, and in my first meeting with the victims' families, I gave them the only promise we at the NTSB have to give, that we would investigate and issue safety recommendations aimed at preventing similar suffering for other families. And then we would I would vigorously work to ensure those safety recommendations are implemented. I want to thank you, Chairman Carbajal, your colleagues in the California delegation, and the members and staff of this subcommittee for your efforts to enact legislation that address our recommendations to improve marine safety, many of which stem from the Conception investigation. Unfortunately, the Conception isn't the only deadly passenger vessel tragedy in recent history. Since 1999, we've investigated 3 accidents involving passenger ferries in New York, a deadly fire on the small passenger vessel Island Lady in Florida, and duck boat accidents in Arkansas, Pennsylvania, and Missouri. Including the Conception, a total of 86 people died in these tragedies. 86 lives lost unnecessarily, 86 people who have left behind bereaved families and friends. That's a lot of lives impacted. Following these investigations, we issued multiple recommendations to the U.S. Coast Guard and the maritime industry aimed at closing known safety gaps, and we included passenger vessel safety on our most wanted list of transportation safety improvements. There are currently 19 open NTSB recommendations regarding small passenger vessels. One of those recommendations would require operators to implement a preventative maintenance program. We issued it 20 years ago. Another would require operators to implement a safety management system, which we also issued 20 years ago. We reiterated that in 2012, again in 2018, and again in 2020, following numerous tragedies. We're pleased the Coast Guard has issued a rulemaking to move SMS forward. For 2 decades, we've also recommended that the Coast Guard address significant safety issues with duck boats. Had those recommendations been acted upon following the sinking of Miss Majestic in 1999, the tragedy in Branson and the 17 lives lost likely would not have occurred. Thank you for including provisions to address this in the Coast Guard authorization bill that the House is considering. And thank you to the Coast Guard for moving forward with our recommendations on fire safety and emergency egress in an interim final rule. But it shouldn't take an act of Congress to address known safety issues with duck boats or any other vessel. A few weeks ago, I spoke before the Passenger Vessel Association. I was asked what keeps me up at night. It's the next mother, father, sister, brother, son, or daughter who loses their life in a tragedy we investigate. It's knowing that we've previously investigated a similar tragedy, and it's knowing that it was preventable had our recommendations been implemented. I want to close by thanking those who dedicate their lives and livelihoods to improving marine safety and who inspire me every day to do all I can to support them and their efforts, our Office of Marine Safety. With me today is the director of the office, Morgan Terrell, and Adam Tucker, who is the investigator in charge of the Conception investigation. Thank you, Chairman Carbajal, thank you, Ranking Member Gibbs, and thank you to the subcommittee members for your continued support of the NTSB and your continued work to improve marine safety as well as safety in other modes of transportation.
Thank you, Ms. Hamady. We will now move on to member questions. Each member will be recognized for 5 minutes, and I will start by recognizing myself. Admiral Mauger, given that the investigations often result in similar recommendations, why has the NTSB board been more expedient than the Coast Guard in investigating the Conception incident? I understand the Coast Guard's own investigation still hasn't come to a conclusion. I understand there's a number of reasons for that, but if you could comment on that, that would be great.
Mr. Chairman, the Coast Guard and NTSB work very closely together when there's a major marine casualty to make sure that we bring the expertise of both organizations to bear on determining the facts and the primary cause for that casualty. But then we have different responsibilities in terms of the investigations that we carry out. One of the responsibilities that the Coast Guard has to determine through our investigations is whether or not there's any evidence of potential criminal activity as well. And when there is evidence of potential criminal activity, then we work very closely with the Department of Justice and the federal law enforcement agencies to refer our investigation to those organizations for further consideration and prosecution. In the case of Conception and Stretch Duck 7, our casualty investigation information was referred to the Department of Justice and is awaiting their results on the criminal prosecution of both of those cases. But we're not waiting to make sure that the lessons that we learn from our investigation are applied. In the time following both the Conception casualty and the Stretch Duck 7 casualty, we released policy statements, we changed our compliance procedures, and we set about developing new safety regulations that come into effect next week that make sure that we strengthen the safety standards, even though our casualty investigation hasn't yet been concluded.
Thank you. Admiral Mauger, in its investigation of the Conception incident, The NTSB reiterated its recommendations to the Coast Guard that it require all operators of U.S. flag passenger vessels to implement a safety management system. And last year, the Coast Guard issued a proposed rulemaking SMS requirements for all passenger vessels. Since it has been 2.5 years since the conception tragedy, when can we expect implementation?
Mr. Chairman, safety management systems are a key portion of that safety responsibility. As I mentioned in my opening statement, safety is a shared responsibility between the owner, the operator of the vessel, the captain and crew on board, and the Coast Guard. And the owner and operator is responsible for setting that safety culture and providing those resources to the captain and crew to do their job. And that's what safety management systems are intended to provide. Last January, we released an advance notice of proposed rulemaking describing our intent to issue safety management system regulations for passenger vessels. Through the public comment period for that rulemaking, we received over 134 comments. Some of the questions that we had asked were what were the benefits that industry members had seen for that? What were benefits that public had seen from the implementation of those safety management systems? How were they implemented? How did they check compliance? What were the costs associated with all those? And so with 134 responses, we've got a wide range of comments ranging from implementation in excess of $500,000 to implementation that was only in the tens of thousands of dollars to implement. And so we're working through, and then the passenger vessel industry as well is a very diverse industry. We're working through very carefully to make sure that we take all of that input into effect and put that together in a policy statement that will come out as a notice of proposed rulemaking. We're working very diligently to get that out as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Ms. Hammond, you spoke a lot about the importance of SMS on all vessels in your testimony. Would you care to comment on the Coast Guard's response?
Yeah, on SMS, I do understand rulemaking can be difficult, but in the meantime, we continue to see tragedies which have taken lives. So moving forward in an expeditious manner is important, but while the Coast Guard is moving forward, there is nothing preventing the passenger vessel industry from implementing SMS voluntarily, and they should. And we've seen incredible benefits in other modes of transportation, including aviation, where they have implemented safety management systems successfully. In fact, in commercial aviation, and I'm sure Mr. Larson can echo this, we've had over the past 7 of the past 10 years in commercial passenger aviation, 0 deaths. And that's what we want to see. That's the goal in small passenger vessel operations as well.
Thank you. Chair Hammond, in your testimony, you provided an appendix which included the status of the Coast Guard responses to NTSB recommendations. This is extremely helpful to see, so I thank you for that information. Could you explain what the NTSB considers an unacceptable response from the Coast Guard?
Yes, thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. An unacceptable response would be one that does not address our recommendation or fails to address it completely. We have right now 19 small passenger vessel recommendations that are open. 4 of those are open unacceptable. Those are around voyage data recorders, which without voyage data recorders, if you used aviation as an example, it would be like conducting an investigation without a black box. And that information is critical not just for an NTSB's investigation, but it's critical for the operator to know what happened after an accident occurs. That information is key. So we have 4, those 4 are open unacceptable right now, and the rest of those 19 are open acceptable. Overall, we have 93 open recommendations to the Coast Guard, about 34% are unacceptable right now.
Thank you. Chair Homendy, would you send your family out on an old T overnight passenger vessel similar to the Conception?
I have a daughter who's 14 and a husband, and I would not. The Conception was designed so it had an emergency egress and then the main entrance to the bunk area that both ended up into the same area, which was engulfed in flames. I would not.
Thank you for your candid response, and I think that speaks volumes. So thank you for answering that question. With that, I am now going to move on to Ranking Member Gibbs for his questions, and I just want to remind everyone that we will have a second round of questions that I will be leading after we finish this round again. So with that, Representative Gibbs.
Thank you, Chairman. Admiral Mauger, it's always preferable for the Coast Guard's marine casualty reports and final action memos from the Commandant before we move on any legislation to improve on marine safety. We had the final action memo related to the Alfaro accident before we moved on to legislation that related to that accident. However, we still do not have a marine casualty investigation or the Commandant's final action memo for either the 2018 duck boat accident in Missouri or the 2019 Conception dive boat fire, which occurred in the Chairman's District. When do you expect these investigations to be available for the subcommittees to review? Admiral.
Ranking Member, our investigations are right now coordinated with the Department of Justice, pending the results of their actions with regard to criminal matters associated with both Stretch Duck 7 and Conception. So, but in the meantime, we're not waiting to identify any of those safety lessons learned from either of those accidents and take action on those safety lessons learned. And so we've looked to the National Transportation Safety Board and to our own investigators to learn what we can from those casualties and then implement regulations or implement policies and regulations to address those particular issues. All of the provisions that were included in the Elijah Cummings Act of 2020, for example, have been incorporated into our regulation for small passenger vessel fire safety, which takes effect on Monday next week.
That's good, because it sounds like you have moved on the safety, just wait for the DOJ for any liabilities or criminal activity. So I appreciate that answer. Also, Admiral, I think this is already addressed. You said it here next Monday, March 28th. I think that's next week. New rules would be from small passenger vessels. I'm looking through here on this chart. I assume it's a typo. I just bring this up just so they can correct it. So on some of those requirements in the chart, they say 3/28/2022, but some say 3/38. So I might want to correct that typo. I don't think there's 38 days in March. That was tongue in cheek there. Anyways, also GAO Admiral issues a report January 12th of this year, enhancements needed to strengthen the marine inspection workforce planning efforts. GAO made 5 recommendations regarding marine inspection workforce planning. I understand these recommendations remain open. When does the Coast Guard intend to respond to GAO's recommendations?
Ranking Member, we appreciate the oversight from Congress and the support that's been provided to strengthen our marine inspection program. And so the GAO report identified a number of areas where we can take further improvements by collecting additional data and reporting on additional data. And so we continue to evaluate that, and we'll look forward to responding to GAO as quickly as possible with a detailed plan for how we're going to address those recommendations. We've incorporated many of the ideas identified in the GAO report already into our prevention readiness initiative. As you know, the Commandant has really been focused on the readiness of the Coast Guard workforce in general. And so with the Commandant's support, the Coast Guard has published a prevention readiness initiative, which is really aimed at making sure that we have the people and the governance and the technology to enable our inspectors and investigators and marine safety personnel to be as capable as they can because their work is just so important. Thank you.
I think, Mr. Chairman, I'll got a couple more questions, but I'll wait for the second round since my time's run low here. We'll move on for the second round, so I yield back at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Gibbs. We will now move on to Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, I do want to express my condolences as well to the families of the victims of conception, as well as of the duck boat incident in Missouri. We had our own incident, a duck boat incident here in Washington State and Seattle. And my first question is for the chair, for Chair Homendy on that issue. Your testimony references the investigation of that duck boat crash in Seattle of 2015. That investigation led to the recommendation that the Coast Guard amend its navigation and vessel inspection circular 1-01 to ensure passengers unbuckle before waterborne operations and the crew confirms passengers have complied. Now, you have currently classified that recommendation as the recommendation has not yet been followed by the Coast Guard, but you classify that as open and acceptable response. So I was wondering, Chair, is the failure to implement a recommendation an acceptable response? Can you explain how the NTSB, approaches that? How should we read that?
Yes, thank you for the question, Congressman Larson, or Chairman Larson. When we consider a recommendation status change that does come to the board, and the board considers staff recommendation, when we look at all the factors, we look at, is there an opportunity or has the Coast Guard moved in the direction in any way of implementing that recommendation or signaled that they may implement that recommendation? We don't want to close it or close it unacceptable if there's a possibility that that could move forward. One thing to keep in mind is our reporting to the committee. Often you won't know when something is closed unacceptable, but you will continue to be notified when something remains open unacceptable or open acceptable. So we want to keep that open if there is any possibility of moving forward on a recommendation. Otherwise, it stops communication on that recommendation, especially with the Coast Guard. So we try to keep it open to move things forward.
All right. Your testimony also states NTSB has recommended the Coast Guard require all companies operating domestic passenger vehicles develop and implement a preventive maintenance program for all systems affecting the safe operation. That recommendation has been open for 20 years, I think is what it shows. What's been the impediment in having that recommendation implemented?
Great question. And the reason why we've kept it that one open for 20 years is the Coast Guard has indicated that they may consider preventative maintenance as part of the SMS program or SMS rulemaking that they are moving forward. So we're keeping that open. The official response that we've heard from the Coast Guard is that they had not intended to move that forward, but we're keeping it open in hopes they do move that forward as part of SMS. But as far as why they have not implemented it, possibly Admiral Mauger can discuss further.
All right. Well, we'll track that. I have a different question for Admiral right now, if you don't mind. And Admiral, you mentioned the use of machine learning and artificial intelligence tools in order to improve the targeting, if you will, of what your inspectors look at. Can you tell us what Coast Guard is doing to do the quality assurance on those algorithms to ensure that the algorithms that you're using in your machine learning actually, spit out the best areas for the Coast Guard to target for inspections?
Congressman Larson, what we've been able to do is, first of all, we assembled a panel of experts, collected information both from our own investigations and from the NTSB investigations, and then the information that's recorded in our internal databases of every inspection investigation that have been conducted by the Coast Guard. And then we used the machine learning to identify which of those parameters were really key in identifying those risk drivers. And then sort of validate that model, we sent folks out into the field. We used our field inspectors to follow up and conduct the inspections and look at those factors with specific guidance, and then bring that information back into our database. And so through that targeting process that we've been able to do, we've been able to correct a number of deficiencies and have put our most experienced inspectors on the the highest risk or highest priority vessels, and have put them on there more frequently than we otherwise would have. And so it seems from the information that we've collected that it's working.
Thank you. I've run out of time, but Mr. Chair, I just don't want us to rely on the algorithms to produce the responses. We need to be sure we keep people in the loop on these as well, and that was the purpose of my question, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I yield back, but I have no time to yield back. So, Mr. Chairman, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Next, we'll go to Representative Weber.
Mr. Chairman, go ahead and pass me by right now.
Thank you. We will now then move on to Representative Lowenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for holding this hearing. I too wish to send my condolences to the families of those that died in the tragic accident in Santa Barbara. And I also want to send my condolences to the family of the Dean of the House of Representatives, Don Young. My first question is to Admiral Mauger. In 2014, Admiral, the NTSB recommended that the Coast Guard require installation of voyage data recorders, or VDRs, that meet the international IMO standard for voyage data recorders on new and existing ferry vessels. Chair Hammende just talked about and reiterated that recommendation. Voyage data recorders aid in investigating and analyzing the causes of accidents and identify remedial actions to help prevent future occurrences. Thus, the overall benefit of the system is enhanced passenger safety, resulting in more lives saved. However, the Coast Guard's response to this recommendation is currently classified as open, unacceptable response. And again, Chair Hammende talked about that. The Coast Guard has indicated that an economic analysis shows that the benefits do not outweigh the costs. Admiral Mauger, can you elaborate on the reasoning behind the Coast Guard's non-concurrence?
Congressman, as part of any rulemaking that the Coast Guard undertakes, unless it is specifically directed not to by Congress, the Coast Guard is required by federal regulations to conduct an economic cost-benefit analysis for that rulemaking. And so in the case of voyage data recorders and the work that was done and the standard that was referenced there, we determined that for many of these small businesses, it would have a significant economic impact. That said, as marine safety professionals, we want to have every available information to us to determine the cause and contributing factors to a casualty, and want to make sure that we can do our best to learn from those and move forward. And so technology is changing very rapidly. Cell phones and small electronics have the ability to track speed and location and record information. And so we're looking to see if there's another technological solution to voyage data recorders that might help to ensure safe operations while also providing information post-casualty that we can rely on.
Thank you, Admiral. I have another question that's related. Can you explain why the Coast Guard supports the IMO's efforts for VDR requirements on vessels traveling on international voyages, but does not support a VDR requirement domestically, specifically for passenger ferries, which transport millions of passengers each year? Why do you support this on international voyages, but not on domestic voyages?
Congressman Lowenthal, the rules that are in effect have been applied to international operating vessels, as you've identified. These vessels travel worldwide and can be far out of the reach of marine safety law enforcement agencies or marine safety agencies. And so being able to see what happens no matter where they're operating is very important. There are also lots of lives and cargo at stake in those operations as well. And so having the VDR for those international traveling vessels is something that has been a key part of the international regulations. We will continue to look to see what can be done here domestically, albeit with a different standard to make sure that we have the benefits of that information.
Thank you, Admiral. I'll follow up on these questions in the second round, and I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Lowenthal. Next, we will go to Representative Napolitano.
Thank you, Chairman Carvajal. My condolences to my friend's family, especially his wife, Ann, for the passing of Don Young. And to the families, keep up your voices. We represent you. We need your input, definitely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this critical hearing, and grateful for your incredible leadership on the subcommittee and the great work you've done in the Coast Guard. We must ensure the boaters, families, and customers are protected in secure vessels that are operating safely. Chairwoman Hamady, it's great to see you again. I recall you being in my district 15 years ago to discuss rail safety, and since we have implemented positive train control, which has created a safety for railroad, since that time, no more hairline cracks on the rail, and that has proven to avoid accidents such as the one we had several years back. Excuse me. We are here again in California due to tragic accidents in the maritime industry, but my concern is, do you have enough inspectors to do the job? Is the budget there for you to do that job? And is there anything we can do, maybe provide more policy to speed up the response from the Coast Guard on the length of time it takes to respond to some of the recommendations the NTSB has?
Thank you for your questions. And it has been an absolute pleasure working with you, Chairman Napolitano, over the years on rail safety, grade crossing safety, and a number of safety issues. With respect to the NTSB, we submitted a proposal for reauthorization. Our authorization expires at the end of this year, so we are up for reauthorization. The size of our agency, frankly, has not grown since 1998. Yet requirements have grown. Right now, in our agency, 30% of our workforce is retirement eligible, 30%. In the next 5 years, that grows to 50%. That shows the commitment of our agency workforce to stay and work on safety issues, even if they take 50 years, like PTC did. But they need additional resources. Our Office of Marine Safety has 11 investigators. Our Rail, Pipelines, and Hazardous Materials Office, also 11 investigators. Our Highway Safety Office is in the 20s for investigators. So we need resources. We have a number of challenges. Transportation is growing, new technologies are emerging, that creates complexities, and so we would need additional resources from Congress to help make that happen. We did submit a proposal to increase our authorization levels about 10 to 15 million annually over the next 5 years, which would grow from about 129 million to about 170 million or 175 million at the end of FY 2027. So we would greatly appreciate your support on that. With respect to recommendations, when the Coast Guard was removed from DOT, there was no longer a requirement for the Coast Guard to respond to the NTSB within 90 days of issuance of a recommendation. Currently, we have one recommendation where we received an initial response but haven't heard anything from them for 5 years. And so creating more timely responses would be helpful. And I know that is actually in the Coast Guard reauthorization bill that is currently before the subcommittee and the committee, and we would greatly appreciate that. One thing that is not in there, which we would appreciate you including, is the Secretary of Transportation is also required to report annually on the recommendations in our most wanted list that have not been implemented. That does not apply to the Coast Guard right now, also because that occurred after they were removed from DOT. So would appreciate your consideration of that as well.
I'm sure Mr. Carvajal will make sure that goes into the record. I think I'll yield my, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Napolitano. I will now recognize each member again for an additional 5 minutes of questions. I will start by recognizing myself, and I'll start with Chair Homendy. Do you have concerns with the Coast Guard's current steps to implement requirements from the Section 8441 of the Elijah E. Cummings Coast Guard Authorization of 2020?
Thank you for the question, sir. I had to track which one was the section number. I apologize for that. No, I appreciate the Coast Guard's efforts to move that forward. I appreciate your action to include that in the legislation, and I do appreciate their moving that forward on a timely basis. So thank you.
Proceeding from the perspective of NTSB, does the Coast Guard have the resources it needs to enforce the compliance of small passenger vessel safety regulations? I know you touched on it from a global perspective, from all the scope of responsibility you have from aviation, rail, marine safety, but specifically for marine safety, since today we are focusing on that. If you could elaborate, I'd appreciate it.
For the Coast Guard resources?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the Coast Guard has been an incredible partner with NTSB, and frankly, they need more resources as well. They have incredible personnel who are dedicated to safety, and their leadership has really worked well with the NTSB, including Admiral Bushman, Admiral Mauger, and then Captain Neubauer, who works with us on our safety recommendations and on our investigations. So we appreciate the safety partnership.
Admiral Mauger, that was an opportunity for somebody to advocate for more resources for your department, so you wouldn't have to do it.
You can advocate for my resources, though, next, if you'd like.
Moving on, Chair Homendy, to what extent does the Coast Guard work with the NTSB to respond to the issues identified during accident investigations. Does the collaboration also include the development and training curriculum that covers accident investigations and the consequences of poor inspections or inspection practices?
Yes, sir. When when we conduct any investigation, we look at investigations from a very broad perspective, and that, of course, includes training and inspection as well.
Thank you. Admiral Mauger, according to the 2022 GAO report on the Coast Guard's Marine Inspection Program, the Coast Guard's own analysis indicated that it had about 24% fewer marine inspectors with the advanced qualifications than it needed to conduct its work. How does the Coast Guard plan to complete its inspections, given the policy that these inspections be concluded by marine inspectors with advanced qualifications?
Mr. Chairman, we work very closely to make sure that we have prioritized and allocated our resources to the most pressing needs. And so right after conception, we released a inspection policy, a revised inspection policy that put our most experienced inspectors on those vessels that were presented the greatest risk. And we did so making sure that they were on there more than just once a year. As we go forward, it's a combination of making sure that we have the people. Over the course of the last 3 years, with congressional support, we've added 126 people to the Marine Safety Program. 87 of those are out in the field, and we've added about $18 million as well. But as we go forward, we'll continue to build on those requests because the industry that we operate in just is getting increasingly more complex and more congested every day. So it's important that we stay after that.
Thank you. Admiral Mauger, the NTSB's investigation of the Conception incident found that the vessel and other vessels of the operating company were regularly operating in contravention of the regulations, and the vessel's certificate of inspection, which required a roving patrol at night and while passengers were in their bunks. The NTSB recommended that the Coast Guard develop and implement a means to verify that small passenger vessel owners, operators, and charters are conducting roving patrols as required by 46 CFR Subchapter T and my bill. The Small Passenger Vessel Safety Act required devices to ensure crews on the watch are awake. The Coast Guard previously indicated the requirements of the vessels will take effect on or around March 28th. Can you comment on where this stands and if we expect vessels to have the technology operational next week?
So under the regulation, Mr. Chairman, they're required to submit their plans for how they'll come into compliance with the roving watches and the recording of their watches. They're required to submit those plans next week. And so we'll work very closely with the different small passenger vessel operators to make sure that those plans meet both the intent of the regulation and the safety recommendations that have found. In the interim, though, we have also deployed or conducted operations where we've gone out and checked throughout the summer, last summer, to make sure that vessels did have somebody awake and alert and were standing proper watches while they were underway conducting their operations. And so that was a change from previous practice in this area.
Thank you, Admiral. We will now move on to Representative Gibbs.
Thank you, Chairman. Admiral, there's concern out there about the failing IT infrastructure the Coast Guard has, and it's really placed particular restraints on the marine inspectors because they've been unable to implement those IT solutions. I guess a lot of the inspectors' work is done largely away from the office and could be benefit from more robust mobile computing capabilities. What efforts are being undertaken as part of the Coast Guard's IT revolution to improve mobile IT resources for the marine inspectors?
Ranking Member, with support from this subcommittee and from Congress through appropriations under the CARES Act and through our fiscal year appropriations, the Congress has appropriated funds to allow us to really transform our information technology backbone. And that's really important to our marine safety program because, as we talked about earlier in this hearing, we use the information that's collected during those inspections, investigations to conduct targeting and risk assessments and drive our policies and procedures forward to ensure the safety. And so with the money appropriated under the CARES Act, we've made investments in strengthening the overall IT architecture and then have rolled out new mobile technology as well, including the Mobile Inspect app, which allows our inspectors to enter the results of their inspection while they're out in the field. We look forward to continuing to build out that capability as well going forward.
Well, that's good to hear, Admiral. And I guess in future hearings, you can update us on the progress of that, how it's rolling out and how it's making improved efficiencies and all that. So I appreciate that. Also, Admiral, the committee has been requested from the industry to double the time between inspection of the LNG tankers due to problems with scheduling of those sudden inspections. We are told that it's due to limited availability of the inspectors. Pursuant to those requirements, the National Defense Authorization Act, the Coast Guard has set aside 64 billets, including 24 new billets to investigate and prosecute sexual assault and sexual harassment from the Coast Guard. How many new marine inspection billets does the Coast Guard intend to create?
So the FY22 appropriation included a number of new inspection billets. We have a new training program that allows folks that come in to the Coast Guard as enlisted members to become warrant officers and become marine inspectors through that program. And so we've added about a dozen additional billets to train and develop those. We've also added a number of billets to the field, about 24 billets, to improve the training of our marine inspectors out there in the field. And so this is an issue that we take very seriously. We have a prevention readiness initiative that was developed under the direction of Admiral Schultz to make sure that we continue to develop and grow the capacity and capability that we need to oversee the safety within this industry.
Okay, because I know that, like I said, the industry is really concerned about the inspection timing. So I appreciate that. Appreciate all the work you're doing and also Chair Harmony. And Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back. I have no more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ranking Member Gibbs. Next, we'll move on to the Chairman of the Aviation Subcommittee, Mr. Rick Larson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to participate even remotely from just north of you in Washington State. I'm glad to be on today. I'm glad you invited me to let me know about it. I wanted to follow up with Admiral with regards to the question I have for the Chair Homendy. And I'm just reading from my notes here about the about the recommendation, the one recommendation that's been open for 20 years. The NTSB testimony recommended Coast Guard require all companies operating domestic passenger vehicles develop and implement a preventive maintenance program for all systems affecting the safe operation of those vessels. That's been up for 20 years. Can you walk through, you weren't doing this 20 years ago, but you're doing it now. Can you walk through a little bit how a recommendation could be open for 20 years instead of closed and being successfully implemented?
Congressman Larson, safety on board is a responsibility of the owner-operator, the captain and crew, and the Coast Guard. And so the owner-operator really responsible for setting that safety culture, providing the resources and training that the captain and crew need to do their job, and following through with effective management and oversight of the vessel. So from that perspective, programs like preventative maintenance or safety management systems are a really important part of that overall network and framework of safety on board the vessels. We're also required, though, as I mentioned previously, when we issue regulations We're required by federal regulation or federal mandates to take into account cost benefit for implementation of those policies. And so this is something that we've been working at and continuing to look for opportunities to understand, particularly as technology and policies adapt, but as we learn more to implement this. And so we've wanted to, keep this open and continue to work at this and appreciate the NTSB's continued emphasis on this point.
I think Representative Gibbs asked my questions about the how you develop your inspectors, because you're targeting your most experienced inspectors on some things, but you need to ensure that you have a pipeline of folks to fill those roles as those inspectors either leave the Coast Guard or get their next job or so on. Is there anything more you wanted to say to address that, the pipeline of inspectors, ensure a qualified inspector pipeline?
Congressman Larson, we want to make sure that we have a strong inspection workforce to be able to carry out this really important safety mission. And so we've worked very closely with Congress over the course of the past 10 years through the Marine Safety Performance Plan to report out on statistics and report out on the status of our inspection workforce. In the last 3 years, that's translated into additional people doing this work. So we've added 126 billets over the last 3 years. 87 of those are out in the field, and they're doing the prevention work that needs to be done. One of the important pieces that we've added into that as part of our overall readiness initiative is this program called the Enlisted Marine Inspector Training Program, where we transition members from their enlisted career into an officer career through a focused mentorship and apprenticeship in marine inspections. This has gotten a lot of great support from the members within the Coast Guard who are excited to be able to carry out those opportunities. And we expect that it'll have a real benefit for both us and the industry as we're creating the opportunity for more marine inspectors earlier in their career, which means that they should be able to stick around for longer in their career. So we really appreciate the support from Congress on both those initiatives.
Thank you. Chair, if you'll just indulge me in one question for Chair Homendy about aviation. There was a crash yesterday in China of a 737-800-900. And if the chair could just remind us what NTSB's role plays when a U.S.-made airplane crashes in a foreign country, and what you all might be doing in that regard.
Yes, and thank you for the question. We are currently speaking with the State Department and others as the situation develops, but under Annex 13, we would be technical advisors for the investigation. And so with respect to that particular accident, we'll have more information as the day goes on. So if you're interested, I'd be happy to have a further conversation with you to let you know what we intend to do.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And now we'll move on to the distinguished gentleman, Mr. Lowenthal. I just want to say that Mr. Lowenthal has been a great mentor. I'm disappointed that he will be leaving us at the end of this term. In addition to being on the subcommittee, Mr. Lowenthal sits on the Natural Resources Committee and is the chairman of the Energy, Minerals, and Resources Subcommittee. But again, you're going to be a big loss to our Congress, Mr. Lowenthal, and I really appreciate you taking time and being in our hearing today. You're next.
Thank you, Mr. Carbajal, Representative Carbajal. Salute, really, for those kind words. And I'm going to be around for a while, so we'll have plenty of time to talk about the future. In my last questions, I asked Admiral Mauger, could he explain the Coast Guard's open, unacceptable response to the fact that the Coast Guard supports the IMO's efforts for VDR requirements on vessels traveling on international voyages, but does not support a VDR requirement domestically, specifically for passenger ferries, which transport millions of passengers each year. And I thank the Admiral for his response. But I'd like to ask Chair Homendy, in your opinion, Chair Homendy, is there any significant difference between international voyages and domestic voyages that would warrant this disparity in the Coast Guard's reasoning?
There is not.
Well, that's a really complete
and
answer. And I re-
there's no difference. And Congressman, just to add to that, Admiral Mauger had mentioned additional information from cell phones and iPads. There's a big difference between a cell phone and an iPad and a voyage data recorder. This is a recommendation we issued a number of years ago. And like I said, it's like investigating a plane crash without a black box. This is critical information, not just to our safety investigation, but it's critical information to parties to the investigation. The parties to the investigation, which would include companies and others, and they would get access to that information early on so that they could take measures to improve safety early. And so that's why we think it's critical to have voyage data recorders. I think in order to move that forward, Congress is going to have to require it. We have not seen progress with the Coast Guard on this issue, and the response has focused on the cost-benefit analysis. From NTSB's standpoint, the lives are priceless, and all lives, we should do everything we can to save lives and to prevent tragedies. So we currently are working to continue to push VDRs, and we'll continue to do that and hope that Coast Guard takes action.
Thank you. Thank you for that very complete answer. Admiral Mauger, when it comes specifically to passenger ferry vessels, what resources unique to vessel safety of this class of vessels is the Coast Guard most efficient in that would aid in its inspection of these vehicles?
Congressman Lowenthal, in terms of the passenger vessel ferry industry, you know, as you mentioned in your remarks, these are vessels that carry really millions of passengers to work or school every day. And so the inspection that's required for those vessels still complies with our regulations, and but it really relies on that good field level working cooperation between the Coast Guard and the ferry operations where they occur in the nation. In terms of how we roll that up at the national level, it's really about getting more inspectors that are properly trained and outfitted with the right capability to do their job. Our prevention readiness initiative is increasing the number of inspectors that we have, is modernizing their training system so that they can be more effective at their job, and providing them with the technology that they need to be able to enter and conduct their exams on board those vessels.
Thank you, Admiral. With that, I'm going to yield back to the distinguished Chair Carbajal.
Thank you, Mr. Lowenthal. With that, we'll go to Representative Napolitano, who I failed to mention earlier. She is the chairwoman of the Transportation and Infrastructure, Water and Infrastructure Subcommittee. If you noticed, there's many people, many of my colleagues that joined us today also happen to be in leading roles on other subcommittees, and I'm very grateful for all of them taking the time to be part of our committee, our subcommittee hearing today, not just those that serve on my subcommittee, but that go above and beyond and have a relationship to our subcommittee. Chairwoman Napolitano.
Thank you, Chairman Carvajal. Rear Admiral, the Coast Guard is under-recognized as far as I'm concerned in Congress and many of the agencies. You're critical to a lot of our safety. What about the funding that you're receiving? I know sometimes we ask and we get some answers based on the administration side of it, but what do you really need to be able to do a job that you're required to do, especially in training the officers, in making sure that we have enough personnel? Like you're saying that is there a difference between those that operate vessels for work and school versus tourism? How do you differentiate? How are you able to prioritize any of these areas?
Congresswoman, thank you for those kind comments about the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard's committed to the safety of life at sea, and we work very hard to make sure that we have the standards, the compliance activities, and learn from every accident to improve those standards and compliance activities. You know, in order to continue to move forward, this is an increasingly complex maritime system that we operate in. There's more vessels coming into the U.S., as you know, down in your district, bringing cargo. It's absolutely necessary for our economy and for our nation, but it makes it a complex environment for us to work in. And that's why we've really focused on the readiness of our workforce. And so over the course of the past 10 years, we've been submitting a Marine Safety Performance Plan to this subcommittee to keep them apprised of our efforts in building that. But under this commandant, really dialed in on the readiness of the people. And that's making sure that we have the right people and the right technology and the right governance to do that work. And so that's resulted in just the last 3 years, those 126 billets coming in to do this work. 87 of those will be out in the field. And they're getting after all elements of it, from improving our ability to conduct inspections, making sure that we're addressing things like cybersecurity, and then also the improvements to the training of our workforce too. So there's a number of improvements that made. We'll continue to keep the subcommittee apprised and continue to work on
But
it.
what about the budget, sir?
Congresswoman.
Be honest.
Congresswoman, our readiness is wrapped up in the budget that the President submits to Congress each year. And so we'll continue to keep this subcommittee apprised of our progress towards that prevention readiness initiative and getting after that.
Great. Well, as far as implementing recommendation from the TSB board, excuse me, pardon me, I understand the reticence of the marine vessels' compliance with the regs. They will be brought kicking and screaming, just like they did with the railroad on the positive train control. But it saved many lives, and it's worth it. And I hope the public recognizes that it is important for them to understand why the regs are there, and that it is costing the vessels money, and thereby it increases the charge for operating on these recreation and tourism areas. But I don't think that we should be penny pinching when it comes to safety. Chairwoman Hamady, we're again in California due to tragic accidents, and this time, of course, it's a maritime, as explained. What tools, infrastructure, and regulations are needed to address maritime safety in a way we have been successful with the railroad industry?
Thank you for the question, Chair Napolitano. There are many chairs here today, so that's why I keep referencing that. But thank you, and it's implementing our recommendations. We have 93 open recommendations to the Coast Guard, and it's implementing our recommendations and moving forward. One that we haven't discussed today is personal locator beacons. We have a recommendation that came out of Alfaro and others to have personal locator beacons, and we're aware of marine accidents where crew members and others we were able to, or the Coast Guard was able to find them because they had personal locator beacons. These are, $300 GPS units that were provided or used by crew members. And we have recommended that that be mandated so that crew members are provided those personal locator beacons just in case there is an accident and they can be located in waterways.
Is there a reason, Rear Admiral, that this is not implemented?
Congresswoman, we're working very closely. This is another area where technology is emerging very quickly. You mentioned in your remarks about that comparison between cost and safety, and there shouldn't be a price on safety. Under those federal regulations that we're required to comply with, we do have to make that economic analysis unless Congress directs us not to. Under the leadership of this subcommittee, through the Elijah Cummings Act of 2020, Congress directed the implementation of these important fire safety regulations that are going to come into effect next Monday. And they did so in a way that allowed us to move as quickly as possible by bypassing the APA or provisions of the APA for the development and implementation of the interim final rule. And so that's one of the solutions that, in ways that Congress has been very helpful in helping us move forward on this important issue.
Well, I hope it doesn't take forever to implement some of these life-saving techniques in the infrastructure, because it depends on who's on that boat, whose life you may save. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Napolitano. This concludes our hearing. I want to thank the City of Santa Barbara for making this hearing room available to us. I would like to thank the witnesses for your testimony and the answers to our questions. Again, I want to recognize the families that are here who have gone through so much. Thank you for being here. I ask unanimous consent that the record of today's hearing remain open until such time as our witnesses have provided answers to any questions that may be submitted to them in writing. I also ask unanimous consent that the record remain open for 15 days for additional comments and information submitted by members or witnesses to be included in the record of today's hearing. Without objection, so ordered, the subcommittee stands adjourned.